Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I know I said good morning earlier. I think the winter storm here in New York has me a little mixed up. Very happy to have you here. For anyone who doesn't know me, because this is a public webinar, I am Dr. Dennis Melendez, the program director at Cientifico Latino, and I'm happy to have you here for our webinar today, choosing a PhD program, navigating your offers. And this the format is that in the end, we'll have questions from the audience. So please write in any questions at any time into the Q&A section of the window, not the chat, but the Q&A. And I will now introduce our speaker. So we have Paula Martinez-Feduchi. Paula is a second-year PhD student in the Molecular Medicine and Mechanisms of Disease M3D program at the University of Washington. She received a BS in biology and a BS in neuroscience from the Georgia Institute of Technology. In Dr. Astra Bryant's lab, Paula's project seeks to identify the neuromechanisms that underlie temperature-driven host seeking by soil-transmitted parasitic worms. This will improve our understanding of how nervous systems are rewired to produce distinct behaviors. Outside of the lab, she participates in scientific communication and outreach initiatives to increase interest and retention in STEM. So, without further ado, Paula, please share your screen.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Dennis. And good morning to the people that are on the West Coast like I am. So you covered us great, Dennis. Okay. I'm assuming you can see my slides. Great.
yes.
Hi, everyone. So as Dennis introduced me, my name is Paula Martinez-Feduchi. And I've put my email if you have any further questions later. But a little bit about me. I was born in Colombia and I grew up in Spain. And I moved as a student on a visa to study undergrad in the United States. So I'm familiar with applying to graduate schools, both as an international student as well as a domestic applicant. I worked after undergrad for a couple of years at Emory University, gaining more lab experience. And then I applied to graduate schools a second time, and as a domestic applicant. And I was accepted to the University of Washington, where I'm doing research when I'm not in the lab. I like to do glass blowing. I like to bake, as many might know. Grad students love to bake, and it's one of the jokes that people would like to open a bakery. And so I want to start with a disclaimer that these views and opinions are my own, and they don't represent the views of my institution, program, or lab. So congratulations on putting yourself out there. I know at the beginning I said I applied 2 times. So I know it can be really hard to put yourself out there, to be very vulnerable in these applications about your story. And so regardless of the outcome, congratulations. It's a lot of hard work to go through the process. And so a little bit about me, as Dennis said, I study parasitic worms. Originally, I always wanted to study neuroscience, and I was pretty open about what I wanted to study. I came into grad school thinking I might continue my post-bac studies into neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's disease, but I took rotations as an opportunity to try new fields of study, and I really love what I do. And so keep an open mind as you're also considering the fields of study in some of these programs. And so I've divided my presentation into 2 areas, your life and the program. And I want to start with financial support, cost of living, and personal factors, because you won't be able to shine and be the best version of yourself in graduate school, which can already be really hard as a program, without having the support or having too much external stress that might make it difficult to be successful. And so, these personal factors can also influence how much you will enjoy being in the program. It might be the best fit for you, but if you're having difficulties, you'll be too stressed to really enjoy your time. And so some of the ideas and comparison frameworks that I've used before are pros and cons list, maybe an Excel spreadsheet where you write what you like and don't like about the program, or a rank list. And so one thing that I did was make an Excel spreadsheet with the different programs that I've received offers from, and start taking good notes on what the offers explain, what I felt in the interviews, visits, any information that you gathered on some of the topics that I will cover, so that you can have a better idea of how you feel about every program in each aspect. And so how can you find this information? Obviously, as I said, in your visits, but also talk to current students, alumni, even other interviewees and accepted students. And I do want to emphasize that when you talk to people in these programs, you aren't doing it in front of the large crowd at your visits, because people might not feel as comfortable to responding to some of your questions. And so pulling people to the side or contacting them through their email or setting up a Zoom might be a great way to find any information that you might not have been able to ask during your visits, or information about specific PIs or factors of the program. And so I want to first start with financial support. So especially in the current funding situation, it's essential to get an overview of what your stipend and financial support might be. And so this can vary widely. So stipends, things you have to think about aren't just the duration. Are you covered only for a specific number of semesters or quarters, the entire program, a certain number of years? But also things like, are you paid in the summer? And I will go through this a little bit further in the next slide. But also thinking of the idea of whether this money is contingent on TAing or research responsibilities. And so there are a couple of different ways that you could get paid. Some programs may only cover your first year. It is becoming increasingly more common that they cover a certain number of rotations maximum in your first year due to the funding situation. Some programs cover you until you join your permanent lab, whether that is after your second or third rotation. More programs I'm seeing this year are offering funding up to May or June of your first year, and then you're either responsible for finding funding or it's up to your PI and labs funding. Another way that the program might pay for you is if you're guaranteed funding for the duration of your education. So maybe your PI's grant falls through and the program can still cover you. Or maybe there's you don't have to worry about finding external fellowships because in one way or another, you're guaranteed funding for the duration of your stay in the program. I'm seeing more offer letters saying that that might be a maximum of 5 years. Some programs are saying summer is not guaranteed. So be sure to read these offers really carefully. And then for people in direct admission programs, PIs might be funding you from the very start, or as I mentioned earlier, once you end your rotations and you join the lab permanently. But I am seeing situations where students are not being paid from the PI's grants, but instead they're required to TA every semester or quarter. And so these can be really different situations, and TA can be very time consuming depending on your program requirements. You might be asked to TA only for one semester versus if you're funding yourself, it might be 20 hours a week. And so getting information about current students or the program about these type of funding options and what they're offering is essential. And so another part of this financial support includes your benefits, health, vision, dental. Not all programs pay for it in the same way. Sometimes you have to pay out of pocket for all or a percentage. Other times the program covers the cost completely. It really depends on the program or even a union contract. And then some offer the opportunity to contribute to retirement. And that would be on a personal decision if you have the ability to have extra money to put into retirement and savings. And so, as I mentioned before, are you paid in the summer? So an important one is not all summer funding is covered, and it is an interesting situation that I've encountered. So I would double check on the paid summer as well. Other stuff are hidden costs. So student fees are something that I didn't realize until I paid my security deposit to when you accept the offer. And then they're a recurring amount. And so for my program, it's on the lower end, around that $250, $270 a quarter, and that is paid by yourself. But some programs, the fees can be as high as $1,000. And so do ask current students in the program, what do those financial responsibilities look like? Because these are fees that you have to pay yourself, and it's at the beginning of every semester or quarter. Other hidden costs can be technology if you need to purchase a new laptop, if there's certain computing requirements because you're very coding heavy in the lab, or specific software. Sometimes software is offered for free by the university, maybe PIs cover it, but you might also need software, specialized software that you need to pay for yourself. And then in terms of conference travel, this is one that I saw during visits where students would ask the programs, how does conference travel work? Because it can be PI dependent, but also program dependent. And so sometimes when you travel to present as a graduate student, you may be asked to cover upfront your cost of your travel and hotel, and then you will be refunded. But these refunds can take anywhere from a couple weeks to several months. And so knowing this ahead of time so that you can look into internal grants, maybe some travel grants from the university, maybe there's some internal funding you could apply to and look with your PI that could cover that cost so that you're not putting all of that cost up front on your credit card or from your savings. Okay, so after you know what you're getting, what the financial support is and what you're getting paid, things to take into account for the cost of living. I wanted to point out like fund budget. A lot of times when you're looking at these comparisons, make sure that you also have allocations, not just for your rent and utilities and your groceries, healthcare and transportation, your essentials, but also ability to take a break from the lab. And I want to point out that most programs do not allow you to have a second income. It will say very explicitly on your letter. And so some programs may allow you, other programs may be very strict in that if they find out you have a second income, then that means you are kicked out of the program. And so be very clear on whether the cost of living is affordable under the current stipend. For rents and utilities, groceries, a great source are the current students. Ask them where they're living. How do they pay the bills? Do they do roommate situations? Or is there graduate housing? That can be very limited in the university, and availability can have a long wait list. So be sure to find that out. And importantly, what if you have an emergency expense? Does this cost of living allow you to have some savings for some emergency situations? And I will cover some of those later on. And so another part is the cost of your move. So I personally moved from Atlanta all the way to Seattle. And so relocating in the summer was the most expensive season you can move. Most programs don't offer a relocation stipend. And so you need to take that into account. From my personal experience, the sooner you know that you're moving, the earlier you should be planning on checking out how you will move. I've heard all kinds of situations. I've moved with my things. Some people do like moving companies or pods. Those can really vary depending on the price. And some people sell their items and just drive their car if they own one. And so there's, a lot of considerations going into it, especially if you're selling other stuff, replacing things as well. And then when is your start date? So programs vary semester versus quarter. Most programs start August through September, maybe the end of September into October. And so one of the considerations is, will you work until you start? Are you going to take time off? I personally worked until my health insurance would cover me and my husband until our move, because you do have a lapse in healthcare coverage with these programs. And some programs may have a summer opportunity for you to start a little earlier, or you might be able to find a short-term position over the summer to help a lab and work in a lab to earn some extra income before your program starts. And so things that I want you to keep in mind is plan for your first paycheck being 1.5 months behind. I've heard the joke of it being called Broketober because everyone just moved. You're paying for your first security deposit, the first month rent, setting up utilities. And as I mentioned, the health insurance lapses in coverage. So make sure you keep that in mind as well. Okay, now, as you can see, financial support varies widely across programs. So please read your offer letter in detail, read the student handbook, and don't hesitate to reach out to the programs for any clarification. Make sure you understand the funding situation, and given the current funding climate, what happens if this funding situation changes and what are your options so that you can make an informed decision. Okay, so now we've cleared. I'm going to assume the funding situation looks great. So the next step is picturing yourself here. Do you like a big city? Do you like a more suburban or rural area? Do you like the snow Dennis is experiencing? Or are you a warm weathered person? Things that will make your stay there enjoyable. Proximity to family and friends can be really important. Are you able to travel back to see your family in the frequency that you desire in the current stipend? Will you be able to go home for the holidays or if there's an emergency? And what are the cultural expectations for you to visit your family and your own expectations? Do you have family? If so, you might need to think about your partner's job opportunities in this program, like in this city or where the program is, as well as childcare cost and availability. Is it a good social and cultural fit? Are there communities that you're a part of? Cultural, religious, hobby, or sports-based support groups and community resources that will help you have a good support system as you navigate grad school and feel a sense of belonging. And then finally, as I mentioned, recreation. It's important to take a break. I know it's cliche, but grad school is a marathon, not a sprint, and be able to recharge is really important. Okay, in terms of the program culture, I've divided it a little in my brain in how the program responds to things and the people in the program. And so one important thing is, does the program communicate updates and changes in a timely manner? Are they transparent about these changes? Like, for example, a funding situation changes. Are you able to get a clear answer on how that might impact you? And so another idea is, how are concerns addressed? When students have problems, how are they addressed and what happens when conflicts arise? How is the communication? What is the protocol? If you have any issues with your PI, for example, how have students addressed this in the past? And do they get the support they need? And is there diverse representation, not just in the program, but in the people that are at these meetings making these decisions? Do you have a student representative in the program that if any issues arise, they can bring it up to the admin? So for example, in my program, we have student reps. So there's one student rep for every year, and they're in these meetings that are, I believe, in a quarterly basis. In terms of students in the program, is it a collaborative or competitive environment? Do people help each other out? Is it everyone, really excited to focus on their project? And do they interact not just with each other, but with the larger campus community and the city? Are they doing stuff with other programs? Are there hangouts? Will you be able to interact with other scientists, not just, or, graduate students, scientists in my case, that you can gain insight, you can gain support, you can get mentorship from people that have also been going to graduate school. This is a big one. So what are the expectations and attitudes about work? So these are highly dependent on the PI in the lab as well as the program. Most programs have about 2 weeks of vacation time, but again, this depends on your lab and your PI. And also, what are people's attitudes on sickness? I know we just went through the COVID pandemic, but do people go to work sick? Are you expected to provide any doctor's notes and things like that? In terms of the attitudes about work, as I mentioned, how do students spend their time? Is there a work-life balance? Do people take time to focus on other things that are important to them? Is it only work? Do they spend time with their family, hobbies, volunteering, and be able to find other ways to build community? Okay, moving on. Another important thing is your mentor and PI fit. So ask in these interviews, in these visits, or while you're reaching out via email as you're making decisions, if there's some PIs you are really interested in potentially working with, ask them for some questions. I personally use this guide. The QR code should take you there, which covers questions all about the program. It focuses on different people that you can ask these questions, whether it's a PI, a grad student, alumni, admin in the program, and it's very focused on some of the ideas, whether it's about their research, how they mentor students, what is their approach to conflict, how do they mentor students, as well as questions about, funding, and all kinds of culture and lab fit. And so I really enjoyed this resource and I would highly recommend it for everyone. My best method of getting information on mentorship and fit was asking current students and alumni in those labs, taking them out for coffee and asking them if they would pick their mentor if they had to redo their PhD. I found this especially key from students that were about to graduate or had graduated, to be able to see, their whole experience and how, like, the pros and cons of their experience, and be able to decide, like, is this a good fit for me? Would I really thrive in this environment? Okay, another aspect to look at in programs are career outcomes. So programs may traditionally be more focused on making sure that everyone graduates and is looking for academic positions. Some programs do a balance of both. Some are more focused on non-academic positions. And so one great way of figuring it out is, one, asking students, but also go on the program website. What kind of job positions do the alumni get? A lot of the program websites have links to people's LinkedIn. You can Google them, but also see, like, between their graduation date and the start of their new job, how long did it take to get them? Do students that are about to graduate in the next year or so get the support from their program and their PIs and mentors during the job search? Some programs that are very academic focused may not know how to support someone that wants to go into, let's say, pharmaceutical or biotech more non-academic roles. And so knowing what resources the program has, sort of how they can direct you, like let's say you want to go more into the business side of things, can you take MBA or like an MBA course or business classes or policy classes and get involved in to be able to experience what these positions might look like after graduation. And then this ties in with that. So what institutional resources are available? So there are many different facets of resources that I wanted you to consider. So for academic support, are there a writing center if you're writing grants to get someone to review it that has experience? If you're not as well versed in statistics, can you consult someone to be able to get some feedback? There's libraries and coding workshops and tutoring centers. And sometimes programs allow you to audit classes that might be program dependent. So as well as just the instructor of the class might decide they may allow you to unofficially audit a class. So it's important to know what is the flexibility on that, especially for those that may want to learn a new language because you want to move to, let's say, Japan. Here, I'm in Seattle and people are take classes like for Japanese to be able to do research or business in Japan later. Professional development. So are there those entrepreneurship programs I was mentioning? If you're really passionate about teaching undergraduates after you graduate, will they provide you not just with the opportunity to TA, but will you receive some formal training through a teaching program and obtain a certificate that shows people that that is one of your priorities? As I mentioned, grant writing classes and career services to write resumes and be able to do some mock interviews. For family support, is there that family or graduate housing? What are the caregiver and parental leave policies? Not only if you have a child or you're taking care of a sick loved one. Some programs have childcare stipends, and there's more flexibility for caregivers, but these are very union and program dependent. So if these are some of your priorities, then please do ask people, especially older students in the program that might also have families of their own that might have those responsibilities. And I wanted to note, like, this was especially important for me. I have personally experienced loss. And as, people are in graduate school, it's a long period of your life. You might be encountering like your parents or grandparents having health issues. And so it's important to know what kind of resources you have in those situations. For fiscal services, there might be workshops on doing your taxes, resources to finding internal and external funding. And I mention this because taxes can be very different when you're on a fellowship. And so knowing if there are resources for someone to help you is very important. And then another option is the emergency aid funding. So as I mentioned, these stipends, they may cover your cost of living. You may have to live with roommates. Some programs have, and some universities and institutions have additional resources in case of an emergency. If you experience food insecurity, there may be availability for food assistance or maybe a food pantry on campus or some low cost bulk purchases. Are there emergency aid funding if you have medical and dental costs that are not manageable? Is there an availability of temporary housing or even a clothes closet if you have interviews or you need to travel for conferences? And for technology resources, these can be very different, but as I mentioned, one big expense can be a new laptop. I personally had to buy one after my first year because my laptop was from my undergrad and it was showing its age, but also because I've started to code more in graduate school and my laptop sounded like a rocket about to take off. And so it's important to know, like, does the university have a center where you can loan a computer and maybe test out before you make such a big purchase what kind of features you might need? Is there free software maybe in the library or that you can download with your student ID? Or is there a computing cluster if you're very bioinformatics heavy or very coding heavy? Are there those resources so that you can log in or go to the library and be able to access a computer with higher power than what a laptop may be able to do? And lastly, but most importantly, I think, like, what are the support programs available? Whether it's peer mentoring, official or unofficial through your program's current students, older students mentoring younger ones, or a more official setup. The graduate student organizations, let's say you're really interested in that entrepreneurship. Is there a graduate students for business or a group really passionate in policymaking where, they go to activities or maybe they go, to DC and like try to advocate for things if you're in the New York, DC area. Is there a union? And is that important for you to be able to have like a union contract and those resources, as well as the health center and mental health resources? Are you able to get affordable quality care under your current stipend and funding situation? Okay, and based on that, there are clearly a lot of factors that go into your decision. One is if you need more assistance before committing, this is about negotiating if you have two offers. So first and foremost, be polite and professional. If you're asking programs for assistance, they're going to try their hardest to be able to provide for help. I have personally heard and read about people being successful when they're honest and realistic. Don't tell a program that another school offered you a better funding package if that offer doesn't exist. You may also have to provide it to these programs. So please keep in mind and be realistic in this funding situation. Programs might be more limited in what they're able to provide. And just, if you need a little extra assistance, don't be asking for a huge thing, but be ready to commit if they're able to assist you. If you are very polite and professional and they are trying their hardest to recruit you and trying to make this possible for you, they are going to be pulling a lot of strings behind the scenes to try to get this funding and securing it for you. So if you request this funding and they're able to provide it for you, be able to assist it. And so I will say that this assistance can be highly program and institution dependent. I am in the biological sciences, and I haven't personally heard of some of the ways that assistance can be provided, but I have heard that, for example, economics programs might be easier to negotiate with depending on the funding situation or depending on the program. So masters, where you pay tuition and you're not funded, might be easier to negotiate some of these things versus like PhD programs. And as I said before, programs may be limited in how they can help based on limits set by departments on schools, union contracts, as well as internal funding availability and regulations. And so one thing I want to say is that, again, master's versus PhD. So personally, to my knowledge, for what aspects may be negotiable, maybe a TA position or workload. So if you're that master's student that needs additional funding resources, that needs to pay their own tuition and doesn't receive a stipend, you could request if there's any TA positions available, or if you're a graduate student with a lot of TA workload, are there any opportunities so that you may reduce this workload? For summer, as I mentioned, more programs are not covering summer funding, so the summer funding may be negotiable. Maybe you could request an earlier summer start date or assistance finding a short-term position. You could ask for assistance finding that affordable childcare and housing, maybe one-time relocation or technology funds, and a stipend, which, as I said, is very program, institution, and field dependent. So to my knowledge, for biology, PhD programs usually initiate this themselves. So they might call a student directly or email them directly and ask them what other offers they're considering and if they can match them. And so this is an example posted by a student. They said, this program is my top choice, and I was also offered admission to program B with X funding. Due to financial constraints, I would have difficulties attending this program. I wanted to inquire if there are any other internal funding I could be eligible for, or if there's flexibility on decreasing the TA workload requirements. This would allow me to focus on advancing my research or studies and enable me to attend this program. So as always, be very polite and professional. They're going to do their best to help you. They might just, again, be restricted. And I do want to know that the person who sent me this said that to ensure that program A and B that you are considering these offers getting matched are comparable. So the school should know that if they're able to secure this additional funding, that there's a real chance that you will be attending and prepared to accept this offer. Now, I know I said a lot of information, so please add any questions or clarifications you need to the Q&A. And as always, I'm happy to answer any questions offline as well.
Thank you so much, Paula. That was really great. As she said, please write in any questions. We haven't had any throughout the talk, but we did cover a lot. So I'll just give a minute for anyone to write something in. I do have some questions prepared just in case, but ideally we'd like to hear from the crowd, from the audience, and what's going through your minds right now, and um, how many programs
And I'm happy to
are you
review
with
any
now?
of the information I've provided and expand a little more if you will need more clarification.
Right. Why don't I
Yes.
get started? Some questions
Oh,
with
there's a
oh,
webinar Q&A. Yeah, Jorge.
there you go.
So the question is, was I considering between a few offers? And if so, what schools, programs, and why did you choose UW? So I received 6 offers. I ended up choosing UW. It was a balance. This was my top choice. Because it's a translational program, and for me, it was really important to be able to tie my research into eventual outcomes for improving public health and patients' health. Um, and so that was a distinctive thing for me. I did check the cost of living. So I didn't say verbally, I put it on the slide, but PhDstipend.com is a resource I used to be able to compare stipends across programs. So this will vary widely. So some programs might offer a stipend that's lower based on cost of living. Some might be a little higher to adjust for that. But one of my considerations was the funding situation. So this was even prior, I'm in my second year, so this was even prior to the changes at the NIH. But programs take stipends really differently. So some of the offers I was unable to accept purely from a financial standpoint. I was not able to live off of $2,000 net before taxes in like some of the states that are at high cost of living. And in addition, a lot of students in other programs might be TAing 20 hours a week. And so they were taking longer. A PhD takes a long time, but I didn't want to, sorry, my apologies. I didn't want to be somewhere that I was studying for 7 to 9 years because I had to TA 20 hours a week, because that means like half your time is spent, not just in class. And the 20 is an estimate based on like how the universities do it. It really depends what class you're TAing. So if you're TAing a graduate student level class, you might be TAing just a couple hours a week. If you're TAing for undergraduate classes, you might be preparing lesson plans, grading tests, grading homework, and that's a lot of time. And so that was a big factor for me as well, is how that funding structure was done and comparing that. Was I going to get financial support the whole time? Did I have to TA the entirety of my graduate school? And that would mean delaying my research because I'm spending less time on it. As well as like, honestly, like I asked a lot of program students, like, what do you do for fun? And it really varies widely, like the work-life balance and the culture of each program. So what are people's attitudes towards work-life balance? What are people's attitudes towards each other? Do you see each other as like competition, or do you help each other to succeed? And so for me, it was a mix of like the financial and the cultural fit. I wanted to be, I've never lived somewhere as cold as Seattle. But I also wanted to be somewhere that I would enjoy, outside of lab. Do I have stuff that I love to do? Like I love walking around. Been getting into hiking. It's a good Pacific Northwest. And just like, what are things that would be fulfilling and enriching, not just in the program, but outside, to have, a whole complete experience. Yeah.
Thank you. We do have a couple questions in the Q&A now pouring in. So first we have from Lizette Hernandez. If you have multiple offers, how do you deal with feeling bad about declining offers? Should you send an email to the PIs that you will not be accepting?
Okay, so I was in the GSMI program when I was applying my second time, and so I received a lot of good advice. After my interviews, I sent a thank you email. And some PIs are super enthusiastic. I really clicked in some interviews with some PIs that you might be feeling a little, bad about declining. But at the end of the day, like they're trying to recruit you, but you need to make the best decision for yourself. So don't feel bad because you're making the best decision for you and for what you want, not just like your short-term goals in graduate school, but for your career after. And so I think, they're going to do their best. You're doing their best. Don't feel bad about it. Just be very polite. If you really clicked, like, let's say I really clicked with Dennis in my interview or invitation week, I might send an email and be like, hey, I really enjoyed our talk. And I'd love to keep up with your research. Like, maybe you're still reading their papers. Maybe you're staying in the same field and you'll interact with them at conferences. So, just if you're reaching out, be polite, thank them for their time and consideration. I sent out a couple emails I received were asking me like, oh, where did you end up going? Like, what other offers are you considering? And I was like, thank you so much for the invitation and your time. It was a really difficult decision, but I decided not to attend here. And I really enjoyed our talk, and I'm looking forward to more research that comes out of your lab. So don't be afraid to just, think people, but put yourself first.
We have another question. Can you go over any red flags that may come up when talking to potential mentors, current grad students or
Yeah.
alumni, in culture and fit?
Yeah. So that's tough because it's going to be very dependent on you. You might be someone that doesn't mind being in lab until 2 in the morning. I cannot deal with that work-life balance. If I am going at full steam for a couple days, like that's okay every once in a while. It happens, there's a deadline, but I can't do that 24/7. That being the regular expectation. So for me, that would be a red flag because personally, I treat like graduate school as like more of a 9 to 5, so I can unplug, I can recharge. Am I reading papers in the evening? Sometimes, but that's a personal choice. But really, like, ask yourself, like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for, like, do you mind that competition that I mentioned? Like, I really like the collaborative environment. Like, everyone celebrates each other's successes. Do you prefer, like, a lab where you don't mind, like, oh, there's multiple people working on the same project? That can be iffy. Personally, depends on, like, are you working on the same exact thing? Something associated with that would be like, how do mentors handle and PIs handle authorship? That might be something that comes up if you're working in a project with multiple people. I think like the red flags kind of come up on themselves too. Like if you ask a student, like, how was your experience in this lab? Did you enjoy being in the program? People will tell you the pros and cons themselves, especially as I said, please don't do it in front of everyone. I have heard some stories. Do not do it in front of PIs, in front of like people that are being interviewed in the program. Take them out for coffee, go on a Zoom, contact them somewhere where they feel that it is a safe space where they can, be honest with you. And students will be honest. Like I have never encountered someone that would purposefully like hold back information. Like they'll be real honest about the pros and cons of their experiences. Trying to think. Yeah. It's just so dependent on the programs. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of some of them. Okay.
If you think of any red flags, any more red flags later on, you can, of course, just feel free to come out with it. We
And
have
if you're
someone
not
saying,
sure if it's a red flag, I will drop my email again. And I'm also very recognizable name. So feel free to reach out to me if you're like, hey, Paula, like this is what I'm encountering. Is this like questionable? And I'm more than happy to talk with you about it as well, if there's a specific situation you're unsure of.
so we have someone thanking you for the presentation. They
Oh,
say
thank
that
you.
they're wondering how to navigate a program that is direct admission and choosing which professor to work with when they're both working in a similar area. So one is a faculty, and this student will potentially be the first grad student for them, and another one has been there for about a year and already has a PhD student.
Oh, okay. That's a tough one. I think it is based on, so they're both seem to be quite new. One is just brand new and one has been there for a year. So commonly what you might encounter is as you're doing rotations, as you're talking to people, you might gauge your own risk assessment. So with brand new PIs, you might be really enthusiastic about starting their lab. They may have new ideas about mentoring that you like. They are also looking for funding. So they're applying to a lot of grants. They're trying to establish themselves in the field and they're new to being mentors. Ask them like, what is their mentoring style? Really ask them like what they want their lab culture to be like. What are things they're looking for in people? Because as they're establishing their lab, you're going to be the first graduate student they have. There's a lot of new things in a program. So for example, I'm my PI second grad student. There's a lot of things like even like the other grad student is in a different program, and there's program differences in how you do general exams, of how you do committee meetings. And so there's a lot that you'll be learning together. It can be helpful if the university has some sort of mentorship program for them. So for example, one of the things, bringing it back to the first question, for me was that UW also has mentoring for PIs. So if you're a younger faculty member, they also have like a more established tenured faculty mentor to teach them. So seeing like how amenable they are to, do they receive other support? Are you going to have a thesis committee that is able to also support you in the program in case there are any issues? And the reason I mention it's a risk is because you really don't know how they react in terms of stress, in terms of like grant deadlines, what happens if the data, you know, the experiment isn't going the way you thought it was, all of these intricacies of a like graduate student relationship that you can't ask someone else. So I think it's really important to just have a really honest conversation with them about their mentorship style. Go in detail, tell them, I don't respond well to this type of feedback or like communicate it in this way. I respond better this. Like, is this something that would click? Um, I think it can be hard because if you're dealing with your two faculty members being like pretty new, you can ask that other PhD student that's in the second lab what their experience has been so far. But for more general terms for people, you are dealing with that versus a tenured PI that, you know, has a history of mentoring students, and you can ask a lot of people about their style, but they might also, maybe they're not applying to as many grants. Maybe the lab is much bigger in those, you know, well-established labs. And so getting mentorship can be very different. So it's important to ask. Sometimes like brand new PIs also have a lot of responsibilities. They need to show community engagement. They need to teach classes. So how much time do you get one-on-one? Is that something you want? Do you want a lot of one-on-one time? Like I meet with my PI once a week, but I also know of someone in my program that meets with their PI once every 8 months. So it's a very different like dynamics. And it's not just like a brand new PI and an established one, but just PI dependent. So be sure to ask for clarification on mentoring style and what you do. I think, yeah, and with direct admit, it's even more essential to do so because you are committed to that lab. So as a side note, I would ask those programs that do direct admissions, what happens if you encounter an issue later on? You know, you don't actually click with the PI. This is not a good lab environment for you. How easy is it for you to seek another mentor?
Very good tips there. Um, so we have a question that, you know, I think it should be fairly quick to answer here, but they're wondering, what are the chances of receiving an offer from a school after they've given you, put you on the wait list?
Well, such a big unknown. I'm gonna be honest. I have no idea. It can be programs might be sending you, like they might be sending really small number of offers, especially in this funding situation, because they don't want to send 20 offers when they have funding for 10 people. And then it happens that all 20 say yes. And now they need to find funding for an extra 10. It might just be that they're purposely keeping that class small. Or maybe they're just waiting. And as soon as someone answers yes or no, like they move on to someone down the wait list, I can't give you any good or bad information about that. It's so program dependent. And programs will let you know. I know that it's stressful being on a wait list, but I have not seen any success. I don't know if you have done this on like emailing these committees once you're on the wait list on updates, because they're aware that everyone on the wait list really wants to get off. And so they're trying to provide you as much information in the best timely manner that they can.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that unfortunately you're not gonna be able to do anything other than just wait. I think, and if you wanted to, for your own sanity, just try to boost your confidence a little bit, get your hopes up, and maybe you can think really competitive programs. You know, it's less likely that you're gonna get off the wait list and accepted than ones that are a little less competitive. So you say, oh, this is a mid-tier program, like nobody really wants to go to this school but me, then maybe there's a higher, you'll feel a little more hopeful. But ultimately, there's really nothing you can do, and it just hope for the best and leave it up to chance there, unfortunately.
Yeah. The
Um,
only situation I just thought of where you would reach out if you're on the wait list for any updates is, let's say you receive the NSF GFRP that I know is being reviewed right now, and you receive it and you're fully funded because of it. You might reach out to some of the programs and been like, hey, I bring my own money. Like, I wanted to inform you, does this, change anything? Very politely, of course. Um, that would be the only situation where I could see where I would reach out if I was on a wait list, if I received some external funds to fund myself, because then it's easier for the programs to accept you because they don't have to fund you.
yeah, that's a great point actually. So when you do have some news of like something new to offer that you didn't have when you originally went in, and they put you on the wait list, um, this could be where it feels like you're negotiating your admission there. You say, I'm bringing something else to the table now. Does that change how you feel about bringing me? And in some cases that could be an acceptance as well. It doesn't have to be a fellowship. So maybe you were accepted to a really good program, um, and you say, hey, like they want me over there, and for them, let's say you're like high on the wait list, possibly they could actually see, oh no, this really great candidate got an offer from a really great school. We want to, we do want to bring them, because if the other school is thinking that they're great enough to give them the offer, we should be thinking the same kind of thing. Um, so even if you have an offer somewhere else that you're willing to accept, you could also reach out and under that scenario. Okay. So for the next question, if you're deciding between two programs, both are mostly equal across training and both PIs are a good match, but funding is a huge difference, would you recommend choosing the program with higher guaranteed level of funding or the program that had slightly better student lab vibes?
That's a tough one. I'm guessing that when you're saying both PAs are a good match, they're direct admission. Um, I would really consider, oh, yeah, may I add there are no rotations. I'm considering that's you as a follow-up comment. Um,
Mhm.
I would really question what is the funding difference. And I know this might sound a little crazy. If it is $500 to $1,000 a month difference, I don't know if, mind you, that's before taxes too. I don't know if that would make, for me personally, as much as of a difference in my living situation and the stress levels, like financial cost of living, for me to turn down the other program, if I felt like I would have more success in the lab environment. I think it would have to be like a really big financial difference. If the programs are very comparable cross training, you think the PIs are a good match. I think, yeah, if it's really big difference, that might be a situation where you really have to see like what is the cost of living in the other program, what are the other factors that would ensure like I'm happy. But if the other program is also like it's really good vibes, as you said, um but it's just you are totally unable to live, you are not going to enjoy the vibes when you're stressing out about paying your bills and about like being able to have the heat on, or feeding yourself properly and getting good sleep. That's just going to increase the stress, and graduate school can be stressful. But yeah, if the funding difference, like remember, like it's a number, but it could be a big number. Just divide it by months. Make sure that the funding differences are also not associated with, as I mentioned before, maybe one has the summer funding and one doesn't. Like, is that something you could reach out about? Um, yeah, I'm sorry that's not as helpful. I can't tell you which one you would prefer, but for me personally, I think the funding difference would either have to be really huge, and one of them is like an unaffordable place to live, and I would pick then the one with better funding, especially now in the current funding situation. Make sure these funding offers are also like you're locked in. You're not gonna suddenly go like on year two and you're like, oh shoot, there's no funding for me. Do I have to leave the program? Um, yeah, I hope that helped. It's a tough question. It's a tough question. I think it's one of those where you also have to think about um whether you would are there other factors that would make you happier in one place versus the other?
Yeah, I mean, when they say the funding is a huge difference, and the vibes are just slightly better in the other one. So, if it's only slightly better, do you just assume that, let's call it all equal, and the only difference is the funding? Then you want to compare. I think you want to do a correction for how far the dollar goes,
Yeah.
in each
I mean,
program.
a
The
funding,
city.
like let's say, Dennis, you said you're in New York City, like a funding offer for Dennis in New York City at 50K is going to be very different than a funding offer of 50K like in a smaller suburban university. So make sure that like the cost of living, not just the raw funding numbers, is what you're considering. And as he said, yeah, I mean, if you're not going to be stressed and they're pretty comparable, otherwise, I would choose not to be stressed. But again, it also depends on like, is it actually huge or is it just an additional like $250 a month?
Right. They say I have two offers, one from a prestigious program, but their scale is small. So I have 1 to 2 PIs in each subfield of immunology. The second program is a less prestigious program overall. They are known for their niche, for the niche that I want to work on, um, also within immunology. Do you have any advice for me? Because this is such a dilemma. Of course, I want a research fit, but I think the institutional name also helps when it comes to industry and non-science jobs.
Okay, I will provide the disclaimer that I don't like the prestige thing, because I think that that can like really carry a lot without looking as what you said, the niche. Like it can be a great institution, but are they doing the things you're interested in? So when you're saying you only have 1 to 2 PIs in each subfield of immunology, do they actually match your research interests? And if there's so little like labs that you might be interested in, I would go ahead and reach out and ask them if they're even taking graduate school students the next year. Like some PIs aren't taking students with funding situations, or sometimes their lab is full and they're not taking more members. So I think that would first be my first step, is making sure that that first program actually has the space for you to do the research that you want to carry out. Um, it honestly, to me, it sounds like you're really excited about that niche too. So if you're really passionate about getting training in that particular area, then that is another consideration for the first program when there's different subfields. I would also say like I'm doing parasitology. I didn't think, coming into grad school, I would love it as much as I do, especially like the intersection with neuroscience. And so also be open on, maybe there's 1 or 2 PIs that do that niche that you want to do, but there's other interesting research areas. And so I would balance it out on whether like how committed are you to this niche that you want to work on. Um, and yes, of course, the institutional name helps, but I'm guessing if they're known for the niche that you want to work on, that they also have like a program or department name. As I said, like the prestige can be broad, but some universities like have specialized departments they're known for in specific fields of study. And so if that second program is really well known for that niche, maybe that is the most prestigious like department in that sense. And so I would look further into that. Um, yeah.
See, as an international applicant, what's one smart and effective way of weighing the funding to cost of living ratio in the United States?
Well, that's a great question. It's so good because my department is having tomorrow a meeting for international scholars on this. I think one thing that isn't mentioned that you might want to keep in mind is how expensive the visa stuff is as well, like regardless of whether you live, like where you end up living, but also as someone that like moved from Spain to Georgia and now Seattle, like the cost of flying back home is a big thing. And so if that is an important thing for you to go back home and see your family and friends and everything and the support system back home, that's another consideration to your cost of living. Um, I would honestly like play around online. Like I would find an apartment, like, okay, if I was going to live close to campus, what are costs of apartment buildings in the area? Um, there's online, you can find cost of living calculators more or less that will tell you like, oh, in Seattle, groceries are this, utilities are about this. Also, don't be afraid to reach out if they're international students in the program right now and ask them what their cost of living and funding situation is like. I know different programs and universities may pay international students differently. So you might get paid less or the same depending on like the tax situation and whether you're being paid out of like one fund versus a different fund. Sometimes graduate programs pay you from like funding that eventually comes from the federal government, and international scholars aren't eligible to apply, for example, for training grants from the NIH. So you might be getting paid through an institutional fellowship or something that might change your funding situation. So I would also double check on that as well. Make sure your letter is very clear on like your funding situation. And then, yeah, I would honestly, one very effective way would be to ask current students that are international in the program. And if they can't, ask the program to connect you to international students, maybe like you're in neuroscience and there's no one that's international right now, but maybe biochemistry down the hall does have an international student. They can still provide you a lot of information.
Thank you so much, Paula. This whole session has been great. Um, and thank you everyone for attending and coming with questions. As Paula mentioned, she will be sharing her, oh, there it is, her email, so that you can reach out if anything pops up over the, over the next time, over this time that you're weighing out your offers. With that, I think we are all done. We are at about 3 p.m. Eastern time. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. And thank you so much, Paula, for a great webinar.
Yeah. Thank you and congratulations, guys. And for those of you that are considering applying again, like I'm more than happy to also talk through that as well. And good luck on your decision.
Take care, everyone.